So this is the fourth Sunday of Lent. It's also the fourth Sunday in this message series that we're in called The Walk. And what this series is about is really us learning or being reminded of five key practices that Jesus modeled for us, that our spiritual ancestors modeled for us and talked about five practices. Because, the Christian faith isn't just about what we believe, it's how we live. And if we can't connect those two, we really aren't doing much. Because faith without action is dead. Belief without action is dead. So we're trying to create these practices that are rhythms of life within us. And we're drawing from the book called The Walk, which is by Adam Hamilton. And these five practices begin with worship. Worship. We started by talking about that. And each one of the practices has a communal aspect and an individual aspect. And the communal aspect of worship is what we're doing right now, gathering together or logging online to be a part of this, where we're singing together and we're focusing together. We're talking about community events together. We're looking at scriptures together. Sometimes we celebrate baptism, and sometimes we do communion and the Lord's Supper together. So that's what communal worship does. And when we do communal worship, the idea is we walk out of here and we do our best to be the living presence of Jesus out in the world. Right? That's what communal worship can do for us. And then the other side of that is the individual side, and that is the challenge for us to be people of prayer. And prayer is us talking to God and maybe more importantly, listening for God's voice in lots of different ways. But the challenge was, we're trying to do this all based on the rhythm of five and looking at our hands. And the worship challenge, communally, let me go back to that. Communally, the worship challenge was, don't make 52 decisions a year. Are you going to be in worship communally? Just make one. So that's what I do. It's a part of my practice is being in worship. I'm only going to make one decision. That is that I'm going to be a part of that. The practice individually is your hand. The 5 times of praying each day. The challenge of praying 5 times. As soon as your eyes open up, that's the first one. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then right before you go to sleep at night. 5 ways to pray. And the 2 key words in that time of prayer, each one of those is thank you. We begin with that. And maybe that's the only prayer you pray in those 5 times a day. Begin there. It can be the starting point. Can't be the ending point, right? Because our prayer lives are meant to grow and evolve and change over time. But we begin with those 5. So that's the practice of worship. The second practice that we talked about was study. And study happens communally when we join together in a group. And that's why here at Woods Chapel we have life groups and classes and study groups and all kinds of different ways for you to get connected. And we have staff members who will help you do that. You can start a group, but to do that collectively, because sometimes individually we can so easily have our blinders on. But when we're sitting in a group of people and we're hearing what's going on in their minds and how they're processing information, what's happening in their hearts, suddenly we can see differently, see different perspectives. So studying together is important. And then studying individually. The goal there, again, 5, to read 5 verses of Scripture every day. That's a beginning point. That's not the end point. That's the beginning point. 5 verses of Scripture might work into 5 chapters of Scripture a week, or whatever that might look like for you. But we begin with that study, listening for God's voice within Scripture. Last week, Brian talked about the third practice, which is serving. He talked about how serving the world is the best way we serve God. Serving the world is the best way we serve God. It's saying to Jesus, here I am, Lord, send me. It's an act of surrender to serve. And the practical application, we'll find ways to serve within the community of the church. When we're trying to always make sure you know that there are serving opportunities within the church and outside the church, that the church can be a catalyst for that. Find ways to serve communally. And then the challenge was, again, with the hand, 5 acts of kindness every day. To have 5 acts of kindness. Actually, this is a left hand. Put your left hand up. 5 acts of kindness. If you have a ring on one of these fingers here, who should one of those acts of kindness be toward every day? Right. You don't even have to say it out loud. 5 acts of kindness, serving. One of those should be toward your spouse. Well, today we're looking at the practice of giving. And last week we talked about how kindness is love in action. Generosity or giving is love that's taken over our wallets. It's looking at the resources that I have, that you have, and us asking, how can I live out loving God and loving people with what I have financially. Now, so how good are we at doing this? How good are you at doing this? And how would you know how well you're doing when it comes to generosity and giving? Now, when I first started in ministry, one of the things I always was challenged by and challenged other people by is to say, okay, the best way you can know how you're doing on generosity is by looking at your checkbook register. How many of you keep a checkbook register right now? Fewer and fewer people keep a checkbook register, right? Where do we keep all that stuff? Pretty much on our phones. That's where we keep it, on an app, or we can glance at that. So, the idea was, you look at, your app for your debit card, you look at that. How much do you spend on yourself? How much do you spend on other people? How much do you give to the church and other organizations? That is a selfie, a generosity selfie of how you practice this out. It's an important thing. One other thing that I read in the book, The Walk, Hamilton writes about an accountant that he knows. His name's Dan Hutchins, and he's done an extensive study. And he says, this guy, Dan Hutchins, says that your tax return is like a selfie of your generosity. In fact, he and some other accountants are suggesting changes in how your credit score is figured because, check this out, their research points to a very strong correlation between a person's practice of generosity and their credit worthiness. They have found a strong correlation that the more generous a person is in giving to nonprofits, the more likely they are to be on time paying their bills and paying off their loans. And the less generous that people are, according to their tax returns, the more likely they are to default on their loans. And I think that's interesting, and I think it points to what Jesus said. One time he said this, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where your treasure is, your heart will be also. That our hearts follow our treasure. That where your treasure is a selfie of what's going on in your heart. Jesus also said this, your life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. Now, let's say that out loud together. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Your life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. And that is so un-American, isn't it? I mean, because almost every other voice in our culture is telling us the opposite, that your life does, in fact, consist of the abundance of your possessions. Those voices are telling us that if you just had a little nicer house, you just had a little newer car, you just had that Louis Vuitton bag, you just had that new set of Apple AirPods, you had that Rolex watch, or whatever it might be, the new cell phone, that you would be happy. Speaking of those voices that call to us, Janet and I went last Saturday, a week ago Saturday, we went to Crown Center. We hadn't been there since we moved here a year and a half ago, so we decided, hey, we got a lot of memories at Crown Center from times we'd come up to the city and growing up and all that. So we went to Crown Center, walked around, it was super cool. See all the little shops, and we went into the hotel and saw that, and then we took the escalator up to Halls, the department store. You know what I'm talking about? Go up to Halls, oh my. That's all I can say, oh my. So I went into the men's department to say, hey, what do they got in here, you know? I see a shirt, it caught my eye. I mean, more like called to me, you know? Like, Aaron, come here. So I go with this cool shirt, and I'm like, Jan, look at this cool shirt. It's very colorful and bright, kind of summery, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I reach in to find the tag, and I couldn't find it, so I got to reach a little. I wonder if there's a correlation between how expensive something is and how far down you have to go to find that tag. So I pulled the tag out. It was over $1,000. But it was on sale, 40% off. So I bought 2. Just kidding. I'm really totally just kidding. I mean, it's like when I saw the amount on there, it just burned my fingers. You're like, ah. So, because that is not a temptation to me. That is not a temptation to me. But there is a store in Crown Center called the Pen Place. Anybody like a pen person? Like, you like specific pens? So I don't collect pens. I do not collect pens. But I do like fountain pens. In fact, that's about the only kind of pen I write with is a fountain pen. And at the Pen Place, They have fountain pens, and they have them from like $6, very inexpensive fountain pens for $6, all the way up to $6,000, a little over $6,000. And so, Janet walked in for a second. She's like, I'm going to the store next door. And so I asked the guy, hey, can I look at that one? Can I look at that one? I did walk out without buying anything. But my point. My point is that those voices call to us and say, yeah, maybe Jesus says your life's not, built on possessions, but wouldn't it be nice to have a new pen? The voices are there and they're real. They call to us. If we had more or newer, we'd be happier, but it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. You see, our economy is actually built on the Greek philosophy of hedonism. And here's hedonism defined. It's maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain. Now, does that sound like a bad thing? Not really, no. I mean, it's not a bad thing to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, but if you think that it means that is the means to life, the full life, a good life, and to have purpose, you're going to be disappointed. Because sometimes the good life is not found in maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Sometimes the best life, the most meaningful and fulfilling things we do are things that are painful and sacrificial and giving things away and doing that thing that is not the most pleasurable thing to do. That sometimes leads to the greatest experience of life. One of the biggest problems with hedonism is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. Doesn't that sound like some sort of, sci-fi mystery thing? I don't know. It sounds kind of creepy, but it's something that we've all experienced. For example, when you're a kid and you want that thing, whatever that thing is, and maybe it's an Xbox or a scooter or a bike or what. I wanted a big wheel so bad as a kid, and I never got one. That's another story for another time. But you wanted that thing as a kid, and you got it. You got that thing, and it was the end-all, be-all, and you were like, I will never need anything else. And then, I don't know, what does it take, a week or 2 weeks or a month maybe? And suddenly you're like, well, what's next? What's that next thing? And then we grow up, and then it's bigger stuff, right? Like that house, that's a great house, and then it's not so great. Or the car that you have, how long does it take you to go from loving the car that you have until, gosh, I'd like a newer one or a nicer one or a different one or one that rides a little lower or a little higher or whatever it might be. I mean, how long does it take? That's hedonic adaptation. I had a friend who was telling me about his brand new Ford F-150. I mean, heated seats, cooled seats, heated steering wheel, driver assist technology. And as he's describing this, I'm thinking, gosh, my 2011 4Runner is just not looking so good anymore. Whatever it might be, that's hedonic adaptation. What was the end-all, be-all is suddenly just, no big deal. There's a character in the Bible, by the way, who talked about this very thing, expresses it so well. Tradition tells us that this is Solomon who wrote these words, King Solomon. He's a guy that devoted his life to maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And by the way, before we put it up on screen, I love that our scriptures are this honest. This honest. They're telling us the flaws of who we are and who some of our spiritual ancestors are. So this is what Solomon wrote. I built houses for myself. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. That was a measure of wealth, herds and flocks. He says, I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh and many combines. I guess he was a farmer. I don't know. Is that combines? I don't know what that. Got to read it closely. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. I mean, from reading that, you got a guy who's really, really happy, right? This guy should be happy because he's got everything. And, one of the descriptions of Solomon, the richest man, wisest man who'd ever lived. So you'd think he'd be happy, but he writes this next phrase over and over and over again. It was all meaningless, vanity, a chasing after the wind. That is hedonic adaptation in a way that we will never experience, but we all experience in our own little way. Trying to find joy, fulfillment in the next thing or the next thing, the newer, the bigger, the better. It's, as Solomon put it, it's a chasing after the wind. So if maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain isn't how we find fulfillment, then how do we do it? How do we do it? I want us to walk out of here with a few things. Again, this is all about practices. I want us to walk out of here with a few things that will help. So, there was the ancient Greek philosophy of hedonism. At the same time, there was a competing philosophy called Stoicism. And it has some beliefs that parallel our Christian beliefs. Not exactly, but some of them do. In fact, the Stoics put it this way. Instead of wanting more, learn to want what you already have. This is a different sort of view. Instead of wanting more, learn to want what you already have. Learning to want what you already have, they believe, leads to contentment. But how do you learn to want what you already have? And they said, well, the key element to that, one word, gratitude. To learn to want what you already have is based in gratitude. It's looking at the car you have already and saying, yeah, it's got some rust on it, it's got some dents, and it's an older model, but I am so grateful for it. I'm so grateful to have it. It's looking at the house you have and saying, gosh, yeah, it's not perfect, but I'm so grateful that I have what I have, even though, I might pick something different. Give thanks for where you live rather than channel your thoughts into newer and bigger. The power of appreciating what we have and learning to want what we have frees us from the forces of hedonic adaptation. Gratitude. Here's another way to break that cycle of hedonism. Live purposefully. So King Solomon, he found that hedonism was just chasing after the wind. It was meaningless. Acquiring stuff so if acquiring stuff is meaningless, then where do we find something that's meaningful? If it's meaningless, where do we find something that's meaningful? And I think that points us to our faith. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And what Jesus was saying in that simple phrase is, there's purpose in me. There's purpose in following me. And that makes me ask the question, do you know what your purpose is? Have you ever defined it? I had a personal mission statement. It was my purpose for a very long time. That was to do God's will with people I love. That was been my driving mission purpose, is to do God's will with people I love. And that worked for a long time. And then about 7, 8 years ago, something struck me that, I don't know, I think just living some life and having some life experiences, I realized what I really am on this planet to do. And it all happened when I discovered that one of the words for clergy, an element of being a pastor, clergy person, is in Latin, it's pontifex. And pontifex literally means bridge builder. And when I heard that, I'm like, that is what I'm here to do. That's what I've been doing, and it's what I want to do. It's what I want my whole life to be about, is building bridges, because bridges connect things, right? And so I've come to this. My purpose is connecting people to God, people to people, and dreams to resources. Resources to dreams. That's what I want to spend my whole life doing. I want that on my tombstone. He was a bridge builder, because that's what I want to do with my life. That's why I serve on the boards I serve on, like Truman Heartland Foundation, because, man, that's all about connecting resources to dreams. And that's why I'm a pastor, connecting people to God and people to people. That's when I feel most alive. What is it for you? I don't know, maybe some of you, just my description of that, maybe it's like, I want to become a pastor. If you want to become a pastor, you talk to me, talk to one of our staff. We'd love to get you on that road to doing that. But you don't have to be a pastor to find your purpose, right? My wife's a teacher. That's her purpose, is educating kids. Maybe you're an engineer, and it's just, doing what engineers do, or I don't know. I'm not an engineer. Maybe you're an artist. Man, we need more art in our world. Maybe that's your purpose. Maybe, I don't know. And maybe your purpose isn't your job. Sometimes we have our day job and we have our real job. Maybe your job is just to earn money to pay the rent. And maybe your real job is something totally different. But I'm just telling you, you find your purpose. And in this issue of hedonic adaptation and hedonism in general, you'll find meaning beyond just maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Find your purpose. And that's part of what we do as a church, right? That's part of what our purpose as a church is to help you find your purpose in what we do in worship. But that leads to one more key to finding meaning and happiness and experiencing the presence of God in these practices, and that is generosity. Back to the practice of giving. Generosity toward God, generosity towards others. I think that we were made for. I think we're created for generosity. I mean, we talk about the practice of prayer, worship, 5 thank yous that we start with prayer. I mean, why are we thanking God? Because God's provided something for us. God's been generous, and we're made in the image of God. So there's something of the image of God in us that is made for generosity, the imago Dei, the image of God. And every one of these 5 practices has a collective and an individual practice, and the collective part of giving is what we do collectively as a church. That's why I encourage you to give to the church, because of what we do and the impact we have in lives here, locally, around the world. And for 29 years, Janet and I, my wife and I, we've been married for 29 years. Every year we have filled out a commitment card to our church. Not out of obligation, but because, man, we see what happens. And that has been our single largest financial commitment, to our single largest part of our budget every year until this last year when we got a mortgage. Now our mortgage is the single largest thing, but it's the second thing, our giving to the church. It's our tangible way of saying, God, we love you. And it's an investment in what the church does. It's an investment in the hundreds, the thousands of lives that are blessed and changed because of what we do together. Hundreds of children and youth experiencing the love of God. Hundreds of adults in all kinds of groups and classes, active retired ministries. So many people given comfort and hope through our pastoral staff and our congregational care ministers who are volunteers. There's a new grief share group that's helping a lot of people through their darkest times of loss. Our Love Y'all group is there to support and encourage LGBTQ people and their families. Our Christmas Eve offering was over $60,000 this past year. All of it went to missions. All of it. A big chunk of it went to Nicaragua that Jake talked about earlier. And then I got to talk about the prom boutique that happened, a week and a half ago. Really amazing. So, we had nearly 4,000 dresses at the prom boutique for girls to come pick from. We had 1,362 young people that we served, students that we served. 1,106 girls took home a beautiful gown. 95 tuxes were provided for the guys. Channel 41 came out and did a piece. I don't know if you saw the piece, but you're about to see it now. Take a look.
Season is right around the corner. For thousands of high schoolers, it's a memorable time, but it can be expensive too. A Church and Lee Summit wants to help lift the financial burden off of families. According to a nationwide survey by Yahoo, an average teen spends, believe it or not, more than $600 on just one night.
KSHB 41 News reporter Gian Kim stopped by the Prom Boutique at Woods Chapel United Methodist Church to see how its mission is making dreams come true.
They're still new. Oh, wow, they are new.
Here at Prom Boutique, every customer is the belle of the ball. The volunteers understand it's an important milestone in a young adult's life.
Something that they can always remember is that they look just fantastic.
For 18 years, Woods Chapel United Methodist Church has eliminated the financial burdens of prom night. It's given away 22,000 dresses by far, and is projected to set a new record this year.
All sizes, all colors, all styles.
Girls can walk out of here today with a dress, 2 pieces of jewelry, a pair of shoes, a purse, all free of charge. I'm currently surrounded by more than 2,500 dresses. The volunteers here tell me it was important for them to offer variety so that the girls feel like they had choices.
This is the first dress I actually tried on. I'm in love with it.
Shanna Pelser tells me money has been tight at home. She's grateful for the chance to go to prom and have her mom by her side during this experience.
To not have to worry about the shoes and the accessories and the expense of the dress and having to let her down, because I know if I take her out shopping, I might not be able to afford the dress that she wanted.
In partnership with area schools, the Prom Boutique had a soft opening on Tuesday, just for students who may not have a means means of transportation. Seniors Michelle, Natalie, and Amber tell me it made all the difference.
I wasn't going to go to prom. This is the only reason why I'm going to prom, actually, because we didn't have enough money.
For me, this is my last year, so it's kind of important to me.
I feel grown, like I'm doing something for myself.
Jian Kim, KISS HB 41 News.
Let me tell you a little bit more about it. One of the things that I think is amazing is that the girls pick out dresses and we alter them on site. We altered about 240 dresses, and some of them get done right then and there. Some of them, it takes a day or two, but we get those to them as quick as we can. Within 48 hours, get those to the girls. We serve kids from 135 different schools. I think that's amazing. And well over 100 homeschooled kids. So I guess they wear their dresses and just kind of dance by themselves in their living room. I don't know how that works. We also served exchange students. You know, they're exchange students that are here from other countries, and they didn't bring a prom dress with them. So we provided dresses for kids from Spain, Switzerland, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, and Tajikistan. We served 28 homeless teens, and we had a large group of kids with special needs. And the helper of those kids with special needs said this. She sent an email. She said, "I thought when we got back on the bus, the girls would be talking about how pretty the dresses were. But all they were saying was how they were treated. They were saying how special they felt, how kind the ladies were, how blessed they all felt." Wow. Over 300, I'm not done. Over 300 volunteers gave their time, gave themselves to make it happen over the course of a year, collecting dresses, setting everything up. The whole church here essentially became a fitting room and alterations place. And so that's a big part of serving right there. But it's your financial gifts that provide the building. It's your financial gifts that provide the staff. It's your financial gifts that provide the promotion so we get word out so that people can hear about that and come. All that happens because together we give, and together we make these things happen. Your generosity makes a difference. And just like last week, we talked about how serving others blesses them, but serving others also blesses us as we serve. Giving also blesses the recipient, and giving blesses us. There's a book called Gross National Happiness, Why Happiness Matters for America and How We Can Get More of It. The author's Alfred Brooks. He's not a Christian. He just wrote this as a secular observer researcher. But he wrote this. He said, "To the extent that happiness can be bought, it is with charity. Giving of effort, time, and money makes people much happier." That's not why we give, right? It's not why we give, but it is certainly a byproduct of what happens when we do. Researchers call this the warm glow of giving. Giving, practicing generosity, it actually affects your brain. It reduces activity in the amygdala. Your amygdala is that source of your worry. It's the source of your fear. It's the center of your brain that does all that. But the pleasure center of the brain is triggered when you're giving. We have lower anxiety. We have better self-esteem. Our tension goes down. Our blood pressure goes down by virtue of practicing generosity. Doesn't it sound like, even on a scientific level, that we're made for generosity? I think it is. Science is just affirming what Jesus said, because Jesus said, "Give and it'll be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And, I think what Jesus is saying there's something about giving that blesses the giver. It fills you with a sense of meaning. And that's why Jesus said these words too. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. We're created to be generous. We're created for generosity, for giving to be a regular rhythm of our lives, but we got to work at it, right? It sometimes doesn't come natural, especially in the little things. We got to work at it. And what do I mean about the little things? This is where we practice these things in small ways, individually. Some examples. I believe, this is my opinion, I believe that Christians should be the best tippers on the planet. And we have the reputation for being the worst. You know, you're going to go out for lunch, a lot of you after this. You know, your server, when they see you coming in and if they can smell a little church on you, they're like, oh no. Because Christians have the reputation of being the worst tippers. Shame on us. I challenge you. I dare you. Should I go all the way? I double dare you. I triple dead dog dare you to be the best tippers on the planet. Because if we practice generosity in the small things, then we get better at it in the big things. And it works both ways too. When we're better at it in the big things, sometimes it's the little things that get done too. So push yourself in generosity. When you're staying in a hotel, I challenge you, again, dare you, triple dead dog dare you. Leave a $5 bill or a $10 bill or a $20 bill for housekeeping. You know, right? You know they're working for minimum wage, don't you? And weird hours and all that. Practice generosity in the little things. Let that tie into and inspire generosity in the big things. Your generosity is a selfie of what's going on the inside. And pushing yourself in your generosity changes who you are on the inside. So each week we give you 5 things to do. When it comes to 5 acts of generosity, here's what I would challenge you to do. 5 acts of, put your hand up, look at your hand, hold your hand up. 5 acts of generosity every month. You know, and one of those should be the regular generosity toward church, but 5 acts of generosity toward people that don't expect it from you, and people who aren't your immediate family, people who cannot give you anything in return, but look for those 5 ways that you can practice generosity. It's right there on the end of your arm. That's the challenge. I want to leave you the one final challenge, a different challenge. There's a filmmaker who did a little test, kind of a little test of sorts with some kids in the Boys and Girls Club in Atlanta. This was a Christmas video that he did, but I think you'll get the point. Take a look.
This year for Christmas, what are you hoping to get?
A computer, big giant Barbie house,
a trophy case,
Xbox 360, Minecraft Legos.
What do you think your mom or dad want for Christmas?
My mom would probably want a ring. She's never really had a ring.
Jewelry, she loves jewelry. A new TV, like watches.
So, we actually did buy an Xbox 360.
What in the world? I wanted this! Okay, and you really got this for me?
A new laptop.
Wow,
And
it's a necklace!
So we also bought a necklace because you said you also wanted to get a necklace for your mom or your auntie. The catch is that you can either get a gift for yourself, or you can pick a gift for your mom and dad. I need you to pick one. Now before you answer, oh, I bet that's hard. Is that a really hard question?
Mm-hmm.
What gift do you pick?
I choose this.
I gotta go with the ring.
What gift do you pick?
That one. That one. That dress. I'll choose this for my mom. I'll choose this one.
It's a really tough question.
I'll
but
give him this.
You already know? Tell me why.
Because Legos don't matter. Your family matters. Not Legos, not toys, your family. So it's either family or Legos, and I choose family.
I cried too. Just get it. Just let it out. Just let it out. These are 8, 9, 10-year-old kids that are giving up a laptop or an Xbox or something they really wanted They seem to know something that maybe we've forgotten when we grow up, that it is more blessed to give than it is to receive, that we're made for generosity, that the greatest joy in life is found in giving, not receiving. Have you learned that yet? Have you forgotten it and need to relearn it? And is your generosity in giving an accurate reflection of your heart? Generosity is a powerful practice in closing the gap between where we are and where we hope to be in living out following Jesus. And putting the practice of giving alongside worship and study and serving closes the gap even faster. Remember, our faith is meant to be lived out. It is meant to be put into practice. Giving is one of those key practices. And for today, that's the good news. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.